Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is Friday, the 11th of February 2022. It's the end of the week, but we have a lot to discuss with you. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with our first segment, and that concerns the highlighting of Islamophobia across the world by Pakistan. Whether it be our Prime Minister Imran Khan, whether it be our other ministers on different international fora, they have been highlighting this scourge of Islamophobia that is engulfing the world. Now, of late, the United Nations Alliance for Civilization also held a meeting, and Pakistan also talked in this forum and highlighted the Islamophobia and urged the international community to focus on combating this rising phenomenon of Islamophobia. This is going to be our leading segment of the day. Islamophobia, how to curb it, how to talk about it, and how to make people understand what Islam means and what Islam means to the people and to other communities as well. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns what is happening in Ukraine. We have been updating it on a very regular basis, but of late, Russia has rolled its tanks across Belarus on Thursday for live wire drills. It is saying that it is holding military drills along with Belarus, which is a long-time ally, but it is drawing the ire of the West, of the United States of America, of Ukraine, who say that this is more or less a pressure tactic and that there might be an incursion into Ukraine by Russia, which Russia has denied since day one. What is going to happen in the days to come? This is going to be our second segment. Then, ladies and gentlemen, in our third story of the day, we're going to talk about France's gender equality minister, who has thrown her support on Thursday behind the Muslim women footballers who are seeking to overturn a ban on the football players to wear headscarves in the pitch. Now, the French Football Federation has currently prevented players in the field to wear any kind of religious sign, whether it be that of the Sikhs, whether it be that for the Muslims. And this is what the French gender equality minister is working to overthrow. And our last story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, is on Morgan Stanley. Now, Pakistan is now eligible for Morgan Stanley's MSCI's Frontier Market 100 and FM 15% country cap indices. This global investment index provider, the Morgan Stanley, said this on Thursday. This is going to reap a lot of economic benefits for Pakistan, and it's a good move ahead. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the first segment of this day, and that concerns Islamophobia, a scourge that is slowly and steadily engulfing the entire world. Pakistan, as a Muslim state, has been endeavoring to make the world understand that we need to curb this menace before it's too late. More in the following report.
In a world marred by xenophobic and far-right political doctrines, emergence of Islamophobia depicts more dangerous phenomenon of contemporary world. Islamophobia comprises faith-based hatred, prejudice, contempt, racism, and stereotypes such that these factors instigate hostile attitude towards Muslim community. Signaling audacious stand against Islamophobia, Pakistan and the UN highlighted the dangerous resurgence of Islamophobia in the world. Addressing a meeting of UN Alliance of Civilization, Ambassador Omar emphasized that the world is witnessing the global resurgence in intolerance, discrimination, racism, negative stereotyping, and violence against persons on the basis of religion or belief. The growing incidence of discrimination and violence based on religion and belief has been repeatedly highlighted by Premier Imran Khan at international fora.
Muslims continue to be targeted with impunity in many countries. Our shrines are being destroyed. Our Prophet Mohammad insulted, the Holy Quran burnt, and all this in the name of freedom of speech. Incidents in Europe, including republication of blasphemous sketches by Charlie Hebdo, are recent examples. We stress that willful provocations and incitement to hate and violence must be universally outlawed.
Since Pakistan has been proactively urging the Muslim leaders to join hands and jointly counter this contemporary scourge, so global leaders are now voicing their concerns about escalating religion-based hatred. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau categorically declared this current menace is unacceptable while announcing appointment of special representative to combat Islamophobia. Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed Pakistan's message by stating that insulting Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, is not freedom of expression. Since marginalization of any community leads to radicalization, it's imperative to combat hate speech and far-right rhetoric, which is fueling fire of faith-based discrimination.
To discuss this very important topic, we've been joined by two guests in the studio. We've been joined by Dr. Mohammad Aslam Khaki Sahab. He's an Islamic scholar. Thank you very much, Dr. Sahab, to have joined us. And online, we've been joined by Hamid Khan Al-Mushriki, who's an analyst. Hamid, thank you very much to have joined us as well. Let's begin with Dr. Sahab. Dr. Sahab, why has this fear of Islam as a religion been inculcated within the people of the world? What is the main reasoning behind it?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The main reasoning which comes out and elaborated by even our Prime Minister, rightly elaborated by him, giving the reason for the reaction of the Muslims when they see that their Holy Prophet, who is dearest to them from all the other people, from their parents, from their children, he has been insulted. So Imran Khan has pointed out this, that the reaction is from the Muslim has a right direction that when you insult their prophet. That's why we say we should condemn actions before we condemn reactions. So we should condemn the blasphemous cartoons or other things. So he has spoke very well, and especially on the Civil Alliance conference and at UN forum and many other forums. Islamophobia, if you see that there is a difference between phobia and fear. Fear is then when it is founded, when you have some evidence of fear there. When you have evidence, if you are in the jungle, you rightly have the evidence that some lion may attack you. This is the fear of lion. But if we are in the studio and I feel fear that the lion may come and attack me and Mr. Omar but would not protect me or help me, this is phobia. Because the environment, there is no evidence. So fear is rightly founded, while the phobia is unfounded fear of the other nation for their ulterior motives.
That is interesting. That is interesting. Hamid, why create an environment in which one fears Islam as a religion and Muslims as a community?
To be honest, if you look into the last 20 years since 9/11, everything's changed in terms of understanding the Islam, in terms of people around the world who are having anything knowledge or anything about Islam. They all got a wrong message, and one way or the other, it was a continuous process of creating and building the hatred against Islam and against the religion of peace. And to be honest, I mean, I would blame our Muslim leaders for the last 20 years that they could not properly defend the Islam in terms of what Prime Minister Imran Khan is trying to do it for the last few years. Or some other did try, but it was not enough to explain the world that you cannot blame everything on Islam. But now, for the last 5-6 years, the things have changed entirely, because Islamophobia is the most rising factor in the world, whether it is in Europe, whether it is in Australia, whether it is in America, and India has become the center of Islamophobia, the center of discrimination and marginalizing the Muslims because of the basis of their faith and religion. And I think it is not only the cause that is the fear or phobia, it is a planned conspiracy, it's a planned, everything against the religion of Islam to undermine and to put the entire Islamic world on the back foot. And that is what we have seen for last many years. That, I mean, I live in Europe, and so many Muslims I have come across where they feel a kind of complex because of the religion they have to defend. And I always explain them that Alhamdulillah, you have got the best religion to defend, you have got the best religion of peace. Now it is the situation that where every Muslim has to take part to defend the religion on the basis of their confidence and on the basis of reality. That is the thing which the world needs to understand. Now there is a second part of it, and that is the government level, a strategical level. And what happened again is that Islam has been targeted, particularly in India, particularly in Europe, because Islam was rising in numbers. If you look into the numbers for the last 25 years, 30 years, it was the fastest growing religion in Europe. Then in India, it was getting better. But then with the planned...
It is basically, Hamid Sahab, in your point of view, it's a rising number of Muslims that is creating that fear that they might overpower the world, and they might be a threat to other religions as well. Dr.
That
Khaki,
was
do
the
you
reason.
agree? Do you agree with that concept of that fear? I mean, it's I mean, you were talking about the lion who's not there, but maybe for them it is the religion that is slowly creeping into the household. So many people have converted to Islam over the last few years in the West because of the simplicity that Islam provides, because of the values that Islam has been providing. Is that what the people fear?
Yeah, that is the main factor which is just leading the European people to a fear rather to the phobia. Because there are two factors in which statistically the Muslims are growing in the European country. Number one is the migration. The people are migrating from the Muslim world to the European countries. And number two, by conversion. So these two factors have led the people, even the European people and some biased European people, not the free-minded or unbiased, because mainly I would say frankly that the European people are the most welcoming nation in the world to the Muslims. That's why there is influx of migration to the European countries, not to the Arab countries, not to Afghanistan, not to other countries. One time there was some political secretary from US, she visited Pakistan and she gathered some scholars, and one of the pseudo scholar I was the part of them. She said that why you are against us? That is the main slogan of that time. I said, why do you hate us? I said, other scholars were talking that yes, we hate you because you have done so, you do that and you do that. At my turn, man, no sir, no ma'am, we never hate you, we love you. He said, how it is? Man, then you can see the long queues before American embassy and no queue before any Muslim country. We love you because you are most welcoming. However, if some group from the European people, we can't generalize them as we expect the people that some nuisance of menace of some Muslim group should not be generalized as the Muslim or Islamic. As Kofi Annan, he was the Secretary General of UN at that time, after 9/11, at the time of 9/11, he also clarified the situation by saying that the Muslim Islam is a peaceful religion and the act of some groups of the Muslim cannot be generalized and Islam can not be labeled as the terrorist religion, as there have been. He quoted some example from the Christian groups.
That is interesting, and I'll take this point with Hamid. Hamid, on the behest of certain quarters, there are certain small groups of so-called Muslims who try to create havoc within the world community, and that leads to a bad name. I mean, the world powers realize that, they understand that. Nevertheless, they do create this impact as if it is the work of the entire Muslim community. Whether it be in the United States, whether it be in Europe, we have talked about it, and in India as well, there is this huge wave of fear of the Muslims and the Islamic religion. Do you feel that can be overturned somehow, or do you feel this is a wave that is going to continue?
It can be overturned, but it is not going to be as easy. It is not going to be easy at all. The reason is that it has been a continuous, propaganda against Islam. It has been a continuous, campaign against the Islam as a religion. It has been a continuous, I should say, movement against the Muslims everywhere in the world. It will take time, but it will. There is only one way to overturn, is that with our unity, with a proper message from the Muslim Ummah, with a proper message from Muslim Ummah, that they need to separate between these I should say the misled Muslims, or even I don't call them Muslims who act anything like terror attacks or anything. So we have to differentiate between those two. That is the main thing. And secondly, we need to understand two things. One, that this is the time when all over the world, Muslim world is more responsible to explain the Western world, to explain the United Nations, to explain the European Union and all the platforms, that by increasing the Islamophobia, they are making the world unsafe place. By increasing the hatred towards Muslims, they are making the world as unsafe place. Rather, they have to create harmony between the Muslims and all the religions. They have to understand the concept of Islam as a peaceful religion, and this way this world can be more peaceful place, rather than trying to bulldozing or trying to overthrow the Islam from this from their ideology. Same, I will always give the example that Prime Minister Imran Khan gave a very good example of Holocaust and blasphemy, because whenever we attach, whenever we talk about the Muslim sentiments, there are Muslim sentiments attached to Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's respect. There are Muslim sentiments attached to the religion itself, but it is nothing to do with Islamophobia. It is the respect which we want from the world, and which is our right as a basic human rights, that we provide, give respect to every religion. Every religion should give us a respect. But again, I said in few programs that this is a time when a few of the major Muslim countries has to come together, make a platform, and send the message to the world as a unanimous message that this is our ideology, this is what we don't want world to do, and Islamophobia is going to cause the trouble in the world rather than having any peace in the future. If they want the peace in between the societies, if they want the peace in between the countries, if they want the peace everywhere, then Islam has to be considered as equal as other religions, and there should not be Islamophobia. It has to be debated publicly. Umar, that is the point. The things has to be debated on the masses level. It cannot be discussed only on a few platforms. Now this is the time where we need to discuss it on the
that is very
masses
interesting,
and the public.
we need to discuss it, and that is what we are doing exactly on this very platform as well, Hamid.
Exactly.
We are discussing this issue of Islamophobia. Thank you very much, Hamid Khan Al-Mushtaki, leading analyst, to have joined us, to have talked to us about Islamophobia. Let's come back to you, Khaki Saab. Khaki Saab, Hamid talked about misled Muslims. This whole process of misleading, whether it be by certain sectors, by certain groups, by certain people for their own reasonings, don't you feel this is leading to a clash of religions, a clash of civilization, or is it deliberate, this clash, that certain sectors want this clash to happen so that one or the other succeeds in it? I mean, what is the basic ideology, in fact, in your point of view, behind this clash between different religions?
There is, you can see that there are some misconceptions and there are some conceptions even that, as I say, that Islam is the most misunderstood religion in the world by its followers more than by non-followers. So some people are misled by misunderstanding the concept of jihad, just picking some example out of context, and the other people have some reason. They are planning to create such events or such misconception in the mind of the people, including in the mind of the Muslims.
True.
So there is the time that we should explain to the people, even to the European people, by holding seminar there. And one good news is that just yesterday I was with the father of Mr. Lord Omar Sarfaraz, who is the Pakistani latest Lord of UK. They are planning to hold a seminar in Pakistan and perhaps in the Oxford University there on Islamophobia to clear the position that what is happening in Pakistan. Now we are heading towards peace. You can see that the events of some terrorist people against the non-Muslim like Umar and that, they have been condemned not only by the NGOs or by the liberal people,
but by the people
by
of
the
Pakistan.
orthodox ulama like Sayyid Rizvi. They have condemned it. Peshawar, the bishop priest was killed, and the minister of the religion and chairman of Islamic Nazariyati Council, they visited and apologized on behalf of the Muslim. Recently, all these events are now by condemned, not appreciated. So it is a good news that we are forwarding towards positive. So there is a need to clarify this situation to the people. Now, by the, we say, encouragement of the international leaders, as we said, PM Khalid and our president, and then the Congress women, Kausai. She also,
Shakovsky, of course,
Shakovsky,
with Ilhan Omar, she has quoted
quoted 500 incidents of Islamophobia. So it's the time to catch the things, I would say. Now the iron is hot, strike it through seminar, debates.
That is so true. The iron is hot, ladies and gentlemen, and we need to strike it now, and we need to make the world understand that Islam is a religion of peace, and Muslims want anything, and they want a peaceful environment, and they want peace with other religions as well. And there's only this certain group of people on the behest of certain vested sectors that are trying to create disharmony amongst the religions. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammad Aslam, Khaki Sahib, Islamic scholar, have joined us and to have talked to us about this very, very important topic on a Friday as well, and that is on Islamophobia. A lot is happening. We know that the US is creating a special envoy to combat Islamophobia. We also have talked in the report that you watched that Justin Trudeau also condemned Islamophobia. Also, Vladimir Putin has condemned this Islamophobic attitude across the world through caricatures and others. So it is a general attitude across the world through the leaders that is also changing. It is high time that the world collectively joins hands in order to eliminate the scourge of Islamophobia. Our next segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the updates as far as Ukraine is concerned. A lot of tension is rising within the region. The military drills so far are about to start, but the tanks are being put on the borders, and that is what is putting a lot of countries at unease, whether it be Ukraine, whether it be the West, whether it be the United States. A lot of meetings are also happening to foresee what they can do. More in the following report.
The escalating crisis on Russia-Ukraine border has taken a spiraling turn. Russia has begun massive military exercises in Belarus and naval drills in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Ukraine has warned of upcoming Russian naval exercises so extensive they would block vital trading routes. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry stated that the planned drills are an abuse of international law by Russia in order to achieve its own geopolitical goals, and it called on other countries to respond by barring Russian ships from their ports. According to New York Times, Moscow described all the drills as legal under international law and promised that Russian troops would leave Belarus after the exercise is concluded. US Embassy in Ukraine marked Russia's move as economic warfare against Ukraine that limits freedom of navigation in the sea and restricts Ukraine's maritime sovereignty. As part of a surge of UK diplomatic activity, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss met her Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, but the results have been disappointing that gave little signs of resolution of Ukraine-Russia standoff. Amid an ongoing crisis, US President Joe Biden has urged American citizens to leave Ukraine immediately and warned about potential major conflict with Russia. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, in a joint conference with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, has notified that the Russia-Ukraine standoff has entered the most dangerous moment. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg also warned about the increasing number of Russian troops on the Ukrainian border and that the warning time for a possible attack is shrinking, marking it a dangerous moment for European security.
Professor Scott Lucas, who is a political analyst, joins us online. Professor Lucas, thank you very much to have joined us. It's a pleasure to have you on our show. A lot of developments, sir, are happening as far as Ukraine is concerned, and a lot of apprehensions, a lot of tensions that there's going to be some kind of an incursion within Ukraine from the Russian side. How much of that, in your point of view, is true?
That's still up to one man, Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has put more than 170,000 Russian troops around Ukraine to the north, the east, and the south. There are Russian warplanes there that are capable of mass bombing, including of the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. There are missiles positioned on the border. And of course, Russia has had special forces inside Ukraine since 2014, supporting the separatists. So Putin could decide on an invasion, as Jens Stoltenberg mentioned, almost at any moment. So far he has not, and the question is whether his gamble has backfired. Because in recent weeks we have seen the US, Europe, and NATO, perhaps belatedly, coming closer together on the idea that Ukraine must be defended against any Russian direct attack. And you're seeing the frustration in Moscow that they haven't been able to split the US from Europe or the European countries from each other. We saw that yesterday with Foreign Minister Lavrov as he met the British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, where he looked basically completely fed up that Russia has not been able to push back, drive back Europe, opening up the way for more operations against Ukraine.
All right. Now, Professor Lucas, when you talk of the different negotiations that are occurring, whether it be between the United Kingdom and Ukraine, whether it be between France and Russia, France and Ukraine, and the talks that are going also within Europe and the US, do you feel that all the sides are trying to discuss some kind of solution to diffuse the tension, or do you feel also as an alternative solution that all of what is happening is more or less a kind of a psychological warfare or a pressure tactic by Russia so that Ukraine does not become part of NATO? Or is there something else on the Russian minds?
Well, I think the starting position is that the two sides are talking past each other still. The U.S., Europe and NATO have made it clear to Vladimir Putin. They have done it through letters from the US, from Moscow. They did it through French President Macron in Moscow on Monday, that they are willing to talk about a strategic framework for Europe, that they're willing to talk about an agreement regarding nuclear forces, an agreement regarding the deployment of conventional forces, an agreement on, let's say, deconfliction, where military exercises don't trigger an escalation. But the fundamental is that this is not what Vladimir Putin wants. He does not want a security agreement for Europe. He wants NATO and Europe to completely break all ties with Ukraine. No defensive weapons, no training, no advisors. And not only does he want, in effect, Ukraine to be left on its own, he wants the NATO to freeze its position, its existing position in member states such as the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and also possibly Poland.
All right. Now, Professor Lucas, in all of this, there are also the accusations from Ukraine towards Russia, whether it be of cyber warfare, whether it be the sea blockade that Ukraine has also pointed towards Russia. Russia says it is due to the naval exercises, but due to whichever reason, Ukraine is pointing a lot of fingers at Russia. Russia doesn't seem to budge a lot, apart from saying that it does not want any incursion within Ukraine. Nevertheless, it does point out that if things are not followed as per the demands of Russia, that there might be something that might happen in the future. Now, the US says that it is not going to send any troops. But there are countries that are weaponizing Ukraine. There are certain countries in the region that are also weaponizing themselves. Do you fear some kind of an incursion happening or some kind of a low-scale war happening in the days to come?
Oh, of course I fear that. But I fear that not because defensive weapons have been given to Ukraine. Let's put it this way. Ukraine does not have 170,000 troops on Russia's border. Ukraine is not supporting separatists inside Russia. Ukraine is not carrying out extensive attacks with special forces in Russia. It is Russia that is basically making this gamble to say we could attack. Now, even if you push back, even if you basically draw a firm line and Vladimir Putin does not invade directly, you mentioned the cyber attacks. Russia has been carrying those out since 2014. Russia seized part of Ukraine, the Crimea, in 2014. They gave missiles to separatists, including one that shot down a Malaysian passenger jet with almost 300 people killed. So stage one of this is what happens with the possibility of a direct war. Stage two that we still have to deal with is ongoing Russian operations to try to destabilize and possibly split Ukraine from within the country.
All right, Professor Lucas, let's also talk about the 8-year separatist conflict that has been going on in eastern Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine say that the Berlin talks have failed to yield any breakthrough. What do you foresee as far as this crisis is also concerned?
So the talks in Berlin, which are called the Normandy format, that took place yesterday are between France, Germany, Ukraine, and Russia. And quite clearly, it's better to talk than to go to war. But there was very little achieved at that meeting because, again, the two sides have different interpretations of what's called the Minsk Protocol. This was the agreement in 2015 to try to stabilize eastern Ukraine. Russia wants eastern Ukraine effectively to split away from Kiev. They want Donetsk and Lugansk to be autonomous regions. They want Ukraine to not have a foreign and defense policy that applies to those regions. Kiev, of course, does not want to give up eastern part of the country. They say that they still have to treat Donetsk and Lugansk very much as part of a unified Ukraine. So this discussion goes back and forth. But again, let me take you back to the starting point. There is a myth out there that most people in eastern Ukraine want to join Russia. That has never been the case. Instead, what Russia has tried to do is to try to destabilize eastern Ukraine, to say, oh, the Russian speakers in Ukraine, they want to be with us. That's what worries Kiev. They worry Kiev that even in negotiations under the Minsk protocols, Russia will effectively control the east of the country, if not legally, then in practice.
Now, Professor Lucas, from the conflict that is happening in Ukraine, I'd like to generalize something and talk about the Indo-Pacific region. Anthony Blinken says that the century is going to be shaped by the Indo-Pacific region and the conflicts that are happening within this region. And he pinpointed towards what is happening in Ukraine. He pinpointed towards, of course, the growing relationship between China and Russia as well. What do you foresee as far as the geostrategic and geopolitical arena of the region is concerned?
Well, certainly I know that the Biden administration has been trying to focus on the Indo-Pacific from the very start of its term, and focusing specifically on competition, perhaps even confrontation with China. But events of recent days show why I think that is not exactly the best approach. Ukraine is not in the Indo-Pacific region. Much of Russia's activity is not in the Indo-Pacific region. We have got serious issues in Africa. We've got serious issues in Latin America. We have a global coronavirus that affects everyone. I think the idea that the Indo-Pacific is important, well, of course. China's important, Japan's important, Australia's important. But to elevate this as being important because there must be a U.S. confrontation with China, I think that's a damaging policy, whether that's done from Washington or from Beijing. China is pursuing an alternative economic system. Let's be honest about that. But I think we have to find a way where the Chinese approach to economics and politics can coexist with the approach which is taken by other countries, including the United States, Europe, and indeed, Pakistan finds itself in a position where it can work with both economic systems rather than having to choose one or the other.
Professor Lucas, the different efforts that have been made by the world leaders, whether it be Emmanuel Macron of France, whether it be the British leaders, we've talked about that, whether it be the Germans, the German Chancellor and others, do you feel that is going to have some kind of a positive outcome in the days to come? Because as far as I understand, even the Russian side is willing to go for talks on the condition that some of their prerequisites are met with. What do you think of the consultations that are happening, that have been happening, that will continue to happen? Do you feel that could result in some kind of a reduction in tension in the region?
We have to hope so, but let me make 2 points. First, from the Russian side, when the Russians say they want to engage in talks, they do so on the basis of demands that they made several weeks ago, which says these have to start with security guarantees from Moscow. Well, of course, the issue in Europe right now is not a security guarantee for Moscow. It's a security guarantee for Ukraine. So when the Russians say they want to engage in talks, you really have to shift the terms. You've got to convince them, no, this is about Europe as a whole. This is not just about you. How do you do that? Well, you've pointed out a lot of the activity, which has been between the U.S. and Europe, within European capitals, and on summits to Moscow. I think there are still questions about the tactics involved. Whether, for example, Germany is committed to suspending the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline if Russia attacks Ukraine. But I think in terms of the general approach, the general strategy, there's been an advance. You have almost every European leader saying, we must be resolute. We cannot accept this invasion. And I think what you have is a division of labor. Some countries will provide military assistance to Ukraine. Some countries will put troops in the countries in Eastern Europe who are NATO members. Others will take economic measures, including sanctions, and that means everyone, not just France, Germany, but every European state from the Baltic states to Italy to the UK, they're involved in this effort as well.
Professor Lucas, how important is Ukraine for Russia, and how important, in your point of view, simultaneously is it for the West, including the United States and Europe? And why this centering of all the importance and this conflict within Ukraine, of this conflict between Russia and the West? They could have had a conflict in other regions. Why is it centered on Ukraine? What is the importance of Ukraine?
I think that's a great question. Of course, it starts off with the fact that Ukraine is a very large country in Eastern Europe. It's geographically important. I think we have to distinguish between the Russian people and Vladimir Putin, though. For many Russian people, of course, there are long-standing ties with Ukraine. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union after the Soviets defeated it in a brief war after World War I. There are many Russian speakers, many people who have a Russian cultural approach who live in Ukraine, who indeed are Ukrainian citizens. So there are ties there. But Vladimir Putin's approach is not that you can have links between Ukraine and Russia. It's that Ukraine should not exist as an independent country. Earlier this week, he said after meeting President Macron of France, using a very crude Russian song, that effectively Ukraine should be dead and raped. In other words, Ukraine should be part of a greater Russia. That's the challenge that we face. In terms of the Western perspective, do Western countries want Ukraine to be part of NATO? No. There has been no move to make Ukraine part of NATO, but there has been a closer relationship between NATO and Ukraine because of Ukraine's position and Putin's approach. Ukraine has drawn closer towards the European Union, but is that because it is anti-Russian? No. That's because it would like the economic benefits of being part of the European Union, or at least affiliated with it. So again, I think we've got two very different approaches here. Can you accept an independent Ukraine, which is not anti-Russian, but which is part of an economic Europe, or do you insist, which is effectively what Vladimir Putin is saying, that Ukraine must be on one side or the other, and in this case, it has to be on my side.
All right. Also, Professor Lucas, when you talk of approaches, do you feel that Russia wants the former Soviet states to become part of the greater Soviet Union that used to be? And do you feel that there are moves in that respect? We've talked about Ukraine, but do you feel there are moves towards other former Soviet states as well?
Yes, absolutely. And again, I distinguish between Russians. Russians may not want the revival of the greater Russia or the Soviet Union, but Vladimir Putin does. Go back to 2007, 2008, with cyber attacks, economic attacks against Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia to prevent them from developing their independent foreign and security policy. Talk about the Russian attempts to undermine governments such as in Moldova. Talk about the Russian war in 2008 against Georgia, or indeed, even beyond the old boundaries of the Soviet Union, Russian efforts in the Balkans. For example, the attempt to overthrow the government of Montenegro. So yes, whether it's because of his conception of a greater Russia, or because Vladimir Putin believes that the best defense is a good offense, he is pursuing what is effectively an expansionist policy. I don't say that to say we want a new Cold War, but to be realistic about dealing with each of these cases on a case-by-case basis.
All right, Professor Lucas, you mentioned the Cold War. I just hope that it doesn't extend, the Cold War doesn't extend beyond China and go towards Russia. This said, do you feel, in case of an incursion, small or large, that the sanctions are going to be extreme from the West, including the United States? We've heard of a lot of sanctions, whether it be the Nord 2 gas pipeline suspension, whether it be other sanctions towards Russia. Do you feel that is going to have disastrous consequences for the region and for Russia in particular?
Yes, the sanctions will be, in the words of both U.S. and European leaders, severe. What does severe mean? It does mean that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would be worth billions of dollars to Russia, will be suspended indefinitely. But I think equally important, the sanctions will be targeted at Vladimir Putin and his inner circle. These are very wealthy Russian politicians and businessmen, but most of their wealth is held outside of Russia. It's held in places like London. Russians have extensive investments in the country where I live. Now, if Vladimir Putin carries out a war against Ukraine, he and the people who support him will be hit financially. That is why I think Moscow's a bit uncertain. They had thought they could divide the U.S. from Europe without paying much of a cost, at least economically and possibly militarily. They will pay a price if they keep pushing.
All right. That's a very interesting approach to all of this. Thank you so much, Professor Scott Lucas, to have joined us and to have talked to us extensively about the background, the current status of the Ukraine crisis, and what are the possibilities in the future if this current tension prevails or it exacerbates. Let's hope that some kind of sense prevails within the parties that are concerned and that some kind of negotiation process comes to a formal conclusion. We'll come very quickly to our last two stories. The first concerns France, where Paris's gender equality minister has thrown her support in favor of the Muslim women footballers because the French Football Federation has preventing players from taking part in competitive matches from wearing religious symbols, such as the Muslim headscarves or the Jewish kippah. And now this French minister, she wants that this ban be overthrown so that the women football players can practice their religion as well, while of course playing football. The French Senate, as we know, is dominated by the right-wing Republicans, and they proposed a law in January that would have banned the wearing of obvious religious symbols, but it was rejected in the lower house on Wednesday, where President Emmanuel Macron's Republic centrist party and allies hold the majority. So let's see how that brings about, what that votes forward. We all know that France is the country of the famous caricatures as well. And finally, let's go to Morgan Stanley and Pakistan, that has qualified for more indices from the Morgan Stanley MSCI frontier market. FM100, FM15% country is capped indices. Now this was informed by Morgan Stanley on Thursday. Now as a result, now companies from Pakistan can qualify to become part of the two indices in MSCI's May 2022 semi-annual index review. This will help passive investors allocate their funds in a variety of markets, equity markets across the world. And of course, MSCI's last simulated index in 2021 had Pakistan a weight of close to 5 to 6% in the FM100 index and 2 to 3% in the FM15% index. So that is going to be, ladies and gentlemen, a huge boost for Pakistan, for Pakistan's economy, now that Morgan Stanley is also supporting Pakistan. Pakistan's economy is moving in the right direction. We just need to be more patient and need to support all the endeavors that the current government and the public-private partnership is yielding. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. It is the end of the week. We'll see you inshallah on Monday with news stories and segments that pertain to you, us and to Pakistan. I always end my show with saying that we need to be extremely careful about ourselves, about the people around us, about our families, about our neighbors, and for that we need to follow the standard operating procedures as far as this pandemic is concerned, and we need to get ourselves vaccinated. Nevertheless, whether you are COVID positive or not, whether there is nobody in your background or in your surroundings that has the virus, get yourselves vaccinated and continue to follow the SOPs also in the religious congregations, in the Friday sermons, during the mosque, in all the normal prayers. Do put your masks on and put a certain distance between yourself and your other, of course, former Pakistanis, your other people who are praying as well. We need to work collectively, ladies and gentlemen. When we work collectively, this is when we yield results. Allah Hafiz, see you on Monday.